David, the youngest boy. 8 brothers standing in a row. The youngest boy at the end of the row is David. David and his brothers lived on a farm near a small town. David was a shepherd boy. He took care of his father's sheep.
To David's town came Samuel the prophet. The prophet invited all the people to a special feast. David's brothers were going to the feast. David's father was going to the feast. But the brothers said to David,
"You are too young to go. You stay home with the sheep."
David took his harp under his arm. He tucked his sling in his belt. He opened the gate to the sheep pen. "Come, sheep, come, lambs," he called. The sheep followed David down the path. Black lamb and curly lamb walked one on each side of David. David led the sheep to a green, grassy place. While the older sheep nibbled grass, black lamb and curly lamb played jumping games and bunting games with the other lambs. David played tunes on his harp and kept close watch of the sheep. Black lamb began to wander away up over the hill. David put down his harp and ran after him. He brought black lamb back to the flock. Then David saw a weed that would make the sheep sick if they ate it. He pulled up the weed and threw it away. A jackal sneaked around a rock toward the sheep. David stamped his foot and the jackal ran.
David took his sling from his belt. It was a long, long sling that his father had made for him from strong brown leather. He put a smooth stone in the sling. Now what should he hit? That red rock? He would try. Around and around and around he swung his sling. Zing went the stone. Ping! It hit the red rock. David put another stone in his sling. He would aim for that round black hole in the tree. Around and around and around he swung the sling. Zing went the stone, straight into the round black hole in the tree.
Then David heard a noise. It wasn't a hopping, thumping noise like a rabbit running through the grass. No, it wasn't a rabbit. It wasn't a picking, pecking noise like a bird pecking on a tree. No, it wasn't a bird. It was a snuffing, gruffing noise, like a big animal prowling around. It was
a bear, a fierce brown bear. And he was sneaking closer and closer and closer to where the lambs were playing.
The bear crept up behind a bush, ready to snatch Curly Lamb as she ran by.
Quickly, David put a stone in his sling. He ran straight toward the bear. Around and around and around he swung the sling. Zing went the stone. It hit the fierce brown bear. The bear fell dead.
David picked up frightened little Curly Lamb and carried her in his arms. Black Lamb kept close by his side. "Come, sheep, come, lambs," called David, and he led them to a place where they would be safe. While the older sheep nibbled the new green grass, Black Lamb and Curly Lamb again played jumping games with the other lambs, and David played tunes on his harp. Now, while David was watching the sheep, Samuel the prophet made ready the feast. David's father was at the feast. David's brothers were at the feast. Before they sat down to eat, the prophet said to David's father,
"Have your boys walk before me, one by one. Today God will choose one of them for something very special."
David's oldest brother walked before the prophet.
"No, it is not this boy,"
said the prophet. The next oldest brother walked before the prophet.
"No, it is not this boy,"
said the prophet. And then the next oldest brother walked before the prophet. The prophet shook his head.
"No, It is not this boy.
One by one, David's brothers walked before the prophet. But each time the prophet said,
No, it is not this boy.
Then the prophet asked David's father,
Have you no other boys? Only the youngest boy. He is herding the sheep. Send and get him, said the prophet.
David came running, his harp under his arm, his sling in his belt. His cheeks were red. The wind blew his hair,
Walk before the prophet, David.
said his father. David walked before the prophet,
This is the one.
said the prophet.
This is the boy God chooses.
The prophet poured sweet-smelling oil on David's head to show that he was the chosen one.
Now we shall sit down to the feast, said the prophet. A place was made for David, and he sat with his father and brothers. Why had David been chosen? What would he do? No one knew. It was a secret. David's father didn't know. David's brothers didn't know. David didn't know. Only the prophet and God knew that someday David would be king. And David would be as good a king as he was a shepherd boy.